The red sand of Kepler 442 be stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the twisted metal remains of mining equipment and the occasional dead tree. Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he adjusted his rifle scope. The heat was getting worse, and they had been hiding in these rocky hills for 3 days now. "Sir, movement at 2 o'clock, whispered Corporal Lisa Wright from behind a boulder. She was young, maybe 22, with brown hair tied back in a tight bun. Her hands shook slightly as she held her weapon. Jake looked through his scope and saw them. 6 Zephyrian soldiers moving in formation across the open ground. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with gray skin that looked like leather. Their big black eyes could see in the dark, and their weapons shot blue plasma that could melt through steel. "I count 6 hostiles," Jake said quietly into his radio. "They're heading straight for us." His team was small. Besides Lisa, there was Danny Cooper, a big guy from Texas who never stopped talking. Then there was Amy Richardson, their medic, who carried the field medkit in her pack. The other 2 were Pete Wilson and Tony Garcia, both good soldiers who had been with Jake for over a year. "What's the plan, sir?" Danny asked, checking his ammunition. "We're outnumbered, but we've got good cover up here." Jake studied the approaching enemy. The Zephyrians were known for their advanced tactics. They had conquered 17 star systems in the past 10 years. Their technology was far ahead of human equipment, and their soldiers were trained from birth to fight. "We wait," Jake decided. "Let them come closer, then we hit them hard and fast." The Zephyrians moved like they owned the place. Their long legs carried them quickly across the rough ground. Each one carried a plasma rifle that hummed with energy. Jake had seen what those weapons could do to human armor. It wasn't pretty. "They're scanning," Amy said, looking at her medical scanner. "I'm picking up their search patterns." Jake nodded. The Zephyrians had sensors that could detect heat, movement, and even the chemical signatures of human equipment. It was only a matter of time before they found the hiding spot. 50 meters and closing," Lisa reported. Jake felt his heart beating faster. This was it. 6 against 6, but the enemy had better weapons and armor. He thought about the standard military briefing he had received about fighting Zephyrians. Keep moving, use cover, and hope for the best. Then something strange happened. The Zephyrian soldiers suddenly stopped walking. They raised their weapons and began scanning more carefully with their electronic devices. Jake could hear them making clicking sounds, which was how they talked to each other. "What are they doing?" Danny whispered. The clicking sounds got louder and more urgent. The lead Zephyrian soldier, who had bright red markings on his armor, was waving his arms and pointing at something. The others gathered around him, their weapons still ready, but their movements becoming more nervous. "They're arguing about something," Pete said. "Look at their body language." Jake watched through his scope as the Zephyrians continued their discussion. Their clicking sounds were getting higher in pitch, which usually meant they were excited or worried about something. "Sir," Amy said, looking at her scanner again. "They're definitely detecting something, but it's not us. They're looking for something specific." The red-marked leader suddenly made a sharp clicking sound that was clearly an order. The other 5 soldiers immediately began to back away. Their weapons still pointed toward the human position, but their movements showing they wanted to leave. "They're retreating," Lisa said in disbelief. "Why would they retreat?" "They have us outnumbered and outgunned." Jake was confused too. In all his years of fighting Zephyrians, he had never seen them back down from a fight they could win. They were known for their aggressive tactics and their refusal to give up once they started an attack. "Maybe they're calling for backup," Danny suggested. "Could be a trap." But the Zephyrians kept moving backward, their formation still organized, but clearly in retreat. The leader was clicking rapidly into a communication device, probably calling his commanders. "This doesn't make sense," Jake muttered. "They had us dead to rights." Amy was still looking at her scanner. "Sir, I'm reading something interesting. Their scanners are focused on my medical equipment. They keep scanning my medkit over and over." Again, Jake looked at Amy's pack. The field medkit was standard issue for all Marine squads. It contained bandages, painkillers, antibiotics, and emergency medical supplies. Nothing dangerous, nothing that could be used as a weapon. Your medkit? Jake asked. Why would they care about medical supplies? I don't know, sir. But every time I move, their scanners lock onto it immediately. The Zephyrian leader was still clicking into his radio. Even from this distance, Jake could tell the alien was agitated. The other soldiers were looking around nervously, as if they expected some kind of attack. They're really leaving, Pete said. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Jake watched as the Zephyrian squad continued their retreat. They moved quickly but carefully, keeping their weapons ready and their eyes on the human position. But they were definitely leaving. Should we follow them? Lisa asked. No, Jake said. This feels wrong. I've never seen Zephyrians run from a fight like this. As the enemy soldiers disappeared over a ridge, Jake lowered his rifle and looked at his team. They were all staring at Amy's medical pack as if it had suddenly become the most important thing in the world. Amy, Jake said slowly, what exactly is in that medkit? Amy opened her pack and started listing the contents. Standard field dressings, morphine injectors, antibiotics, saline solution, emergency surgery tools, blood clotting powder, and some experimental drugs from the medical corps. Experimental drugs? Danny asked. Nothing special, Amy replied. Just new versions of combat stimulants and pain medication. The medical corps is always trying to improve battlefield medicine. Jake thought about what he had just witnessed. The Zephyrians had been ready to attack, but the moment they detected Amy's medical supplies, they had retreated. It didn't make military sense. Sir? Tony said, pointing toward the horizon. More movement. Jake looked through his scope again. Another group of Zephyrians was approaching from the east, but they were moving differently. These soldiers were spread out in a wide formation, and they were advancing very slowly. They're being careful, Jake observed. Very careful. The new group stopped about 200 meters away. Jake could see them setting up some kind of equipment, probably long-range scanners. They were definitely looking for something. They're scanning again, Amy reported. Same pattern as before. They're focused on my medkit. Jake watched as the second group of Zephyrians suddenly stopped their advance. There was more clicking, more urgent communication. Within minutes, they, too, began to retreat. This is impossible, Lisa said. Two different squads, both retreating for the same reason? Jake had been fighting aliens for 5 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The Zephyrians were afraid of something, and that something was connected to Amy's medical supplies. Amy, Jake said, I need you to think carefully. Is there anything unusual about your medkit? Anything that might make the enemy nervous? Amy looked through her supplies again. Sir, it's just standard medical equipment. I don't understand why they would be afraid of bandages and medicine. But Jake was beginning to understand that they were dealing with something beyond normal military tactics. The Zephyrians knew something about human medical equipment that his team didn't know. As the sun began to set over the red landscape of Kepler 442b, Jake Morrison realized that this was just the beginning of a much bigger mystery. Dr. Helen Banks had been working in military hospitals for 15 years, but she had never seen a day like this one. The Zephyrian attack on New Denver had come without warning. Their ships had appeared in the sky at dawn, raining down plasma. Fire on the city below. The medical center where Helen worked was supposed to be safe. It was marked with red crosses and medical symbols that were recognized by all species as neutral territory. But the Zephyrians didn't seem to care about those rules today. We need to evacuate the wounded, shouted Nurse Kevin Martinez as explosions shook the building. The enemy is getting closer. Helen looked around the emergency room. 27 wounded soldiers lay on beds and stretchers. Some had broken bones, others had burns from plasma weapons. Most were unconscious from pain medication. Moving them would be difficult and dangerous. We can't move them, Helen said. Half of these men won't survive transport. We have to stay and hope the Zephyrians respect medical neutrality. But even as she said it, Helen knew that hope was foolish. The sound of weapons fire was getting closer. She could hear the clicking voices of Zephyrian soldiers in the hallway outside. "Doctor, what do we do?" asked Nurse Maria Santos. She was young and scared, holding a medical scanner with shaking hands. Helen looked at the wounded soldiers. "Private." Bobby Clark had been hit by shrapnel and was barely breathing. Corporal Steve Johnson had severe burns on his arms and legs. Sergeant Ryan Davis had taken a direct hit from a plasma weapon and was unconscious, his heartbeat weak and irregular. "We do our jobs," Helen said firmly. "We take care of these soldiers no matter what happens." The doors to the emergency room burst open. 6 Zephyrian soldiers entered with their weapons raised. They were tall and intimidating, their gray skin gleaming under the medical lights. Their black eyes scanned the room, looking for threats. The leader, who had gold markings on his armor, made clicking sounds to the others. They spread out through the room, their plasma rifles humming with energy. Helen could feel the heat from their weapons even from across the room. "You are prisoners," the leader said in broken English. "Do not move. Do not help wounded humans." Helen felt anger building inside her. This is a medical facility. These soldiers need treatment. They're not a threat to anyone. The Zephyrian leader clicked his mandibles, which Helen knew was their way of showing amusement. Humans are always threat. Wounded humans are still dangerous. "They're unconscious," Helen protested. "Look at them. They can't even stand up." But the Zephyrian soldiers were already moving through the room, pointing their weapons at the wounded men. Helen realized with horror that they planned to kill helpless patients. "Stop," she said, stepping in front of Private Clark's bed. "I won't let you hurt them?" The leader raised his weapon toward Helen. "Move away, human doctor. You cannot help them now." Helen felt her heart pounding, but she didn't move. Behind her, Private Clark's heart monitor was beeping weakly. His breathing was getting worse. Without immediate treatment, he would die in the next few minutes. "Please," she said to the Zephyrian leader, "just let me help this one soldier. He's dying." The leader looked at Helen with his big black eyes. "Good, let him die. One less human to fight us." But Helen couldn't accept that. She had taken an oath to save lives, and she wasn't going to break that oath now. She turned around and began working on Private Clark, ignoring the weapons pointed at her back. Clark's pulse was getting weaker. His blood pressure was dropping fast. Helen grabbed emergency drugs from her medical kit and began injecting them into his IV line. She worked quickly, using all her skills to stabilize his condition. "Stop," the Zephyrian leader ordered. "Step away from human soldier." Helen ignored him. She was too focused on saving Clark's life. The young soldier's heart was struggling to beat. His breathing was shallow and irregular. Helen knew she was losing him. "His heart is stopping," she said to herself, grabbing the defibrillator paddles. "Come on, Bobby, don't give up on me." The heart monitor showed a flat line. Private Clark was clinically dead. Helen began CPR, pushing hard on his chest, counting compressions. She had been trained to give up after a certain amount of time, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. "Human doctor," the Zephyrian leader said, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "The soldier is dead. Stop wasting time." But Helen kept working. She gave Clark more drugs, continued CPR, and refused to accept that he was gone. She had saved soldiers in worse condition than this. She wasn't going to give up now. "Come back, Bobby," she whispered as she worked. "Your family needs you. Your unit needs you. Come back." The other Zephyrian soldiers were watching with interest. They had stopped pointing their weapons at the other wounded soldiers and were focused on what Helen was doing. Their clicking sounds were quiet and uncertain. Helen had been doing CPR for 3 minutes when something impossible happened. The heart monitor suddenly showed a rhythm. Not just any rhythm, but a strong, steady heartbeat that was actually better than Clark's normal pulse. "That's not possible," said Kevin Martinez, staring at the monitor. "He was dead for 3 minutes." Helen looked down at Private Clark. His eyes were opening, but they looked different somehow. They seemed to glow with a soft inner light. When he sat up on the bed, his movements were smooth and graceful, not like someone who had just been unconscious. Thank you, Doctor, Clark said, and his voice sounded strange. It was deeper than before, with an odd harmonic quality that seemed to come from somewhere else. The Zephyrian soldiers began clicking excitedly. Their leader stepped backward, his weapon shaking in his hands. The other aliens were making high-pitched, clicking sounds that Helen had never heard before. What is happening? The leader asked in English, his voice full of fear. Private Clark stood up from the bed. His wounds were still visible, but they didn't seem to bother him anymore. He moved, like a dancer, every step perfectly balanced. When he looked at the Zephyrian soldiers, his glowing eyes held no anger, only a calm confidence. You should leave, Clark said quietly. This is a medical facility. These people are trying to help the wounded. The Zephyrian leader raised his plasma rifle and fired directly at Clark. The blue energy beam should have killed him instantly. Instead, Clark moved to the side so smoothly that the plasma bolt passed through empty air. He hadn't appeared to move fast, but somehow he was no longer where the weapon was aimed. Impossible, the leader clicked. No human can move like that. Clark walked toward the Zephyrian soldiers. They fired their weapons again and again, but every shot missed. Clark seemed to know where each beam would go before it was fired. He moved between the energy bolts like he was dancing. Within seconds, Clark was standing in front of the leader. He reached out and gently touched the alien's weapon. The plasma rifle simply stopped working, its energy completely drained. You don't want to hurt anyone, Clark said softly. You're just following orders. But this isn't the right thing to do. The other Zephyrian soldiers tried to attack, but Clark moved among them like flowing water. He touched each weapon and they all stopped working. Then he placed his hands on the soldiers' shoulders and they fell unconscious, not hurt but simply asleep. How did you do that? Helen asked, staring at Clark in amazement. Clark looked at his hands as if he had never seen them before. I don't. No, Doctor, but I feel different. I feel like I can do things I never could before. Helen checked her medical scanner. According to the readings, Clark had been dead for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. But he wasn't just alive now. He was better than alive. His vital signs were perfect, his reflexes were incredible, and there was something else, something the scanner couldn't measure. What happened to me? Clark asked. Helen looked at the unconscious Zephyrian soldiers scattered around the emergency room. She thought about the impossible thing she had just witnessed. She had brought a dead soldier back to life, and he had returned as something more than human. I don't know, she said honestly, but I think we just discovered something very important. Captain Alex Turner sat in his office aboard the USS Defender, looking at 17 different battle reports spread across his desk. Each report told the same impossible story. Human soldiers dying in combat, being brought back to life by medics, and then displaying abilities that defied all logic. This can't be real, Alex muttered to himself, reading the report from New Denver for the 3rd time. People don't come back from the dead with superpowers. But the evidence was right there in front of him. Medical scans, video recordings, witness statements from dozens of soldiers. All of them confirmed the same thing. When humans died and were revived by medical personnel who refused to give up, they came back different. Better, enhanced. Sir, came a voice from the doorway. Lieutenant Commander Kate Murphy entered his office carrying another data pad. We just received another report. This one from the Battle of Titan Station. Alex took the pad and read quickly. The story was familiar now. Marine dies. Medic refuses to accept death. Marine returns with enhanced abilities. The pattern was consistent across all 17 battles. Kate, I need you to tell me honestly. Do you think I'm losing my mind? Kate sat down across from his desk. She was a practical woman, a career officer who didn't believe in fairy tales. Sir, I've been in the military for 20 years. I've seen things that would make most people question their sanity, but this this is different. Different. How? Because it's not just one crazy story. It's 17 different battles on 17 different planets with 17 different medical teams. And they all report the same thing, Alex nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. One report could be explained as battlefield stress or hallucination. But 17 identical reports from unrelated sources? That was harder to dismiss. Have you spoken to any of the soldiers who were brought back? Kate shook her head. Most of them are still in the field. But I did talk to Dr. Helen Banks, the doctor from New Denver. She confirmed everything in her report. Alex had read Dr. Banks' report several times. It was detailed, clinical, and completely unbelievable. According to her account, Private Bobby Clark had been dead for almost 4 minutes before returning with abilities that allowed him to disable an entire squad of Zephyrian soldiers. Sir, there's something else, Kate said. I've been looking at Zephyrian tactical reports. They have a standing order to retreat whenever they detect human medical equipment. What kind of order? It's called Protocol 7. Any Zephyrian unit that encounters humans carrying medical supplies is required to withdraw immediately and call for orbital bombardment instead of engaging in ground combat. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. How long have they had this protocol? According to intercepted communications, at least 5 years. Maybe longer. That meant the Zephyrians had known about this phenomenon long before humans did. They had been studying human medical practices and had developed countermeasures based on what they observed. Kate, I need you to set up a meeting with Dr. Banks and find me a scientist who specializes in human biology. We need to understand what's happening. 3 days later, Alex found himself in the medical bay of the USS Defender, watching the most unusual experiment of his career. Dr. Helen Banks had agreed to demonstrate the phenomenon under controlled conditions. The volunteer was Marine Private Danny Cooper, a big man from Texas who had volunteered for the experiment after hearing about the enhanced abilities. He lay on a medical table, connected to monitors that tracked his vital signs. I want to make something clear, Dr. Banks said to the assembled observers. This is extremely dangerous. We're essentially killing a healthy person and hoping we can bring them back. I'm only doing this because Danny insisted, and because understanding this phenomenon could save lives. Also present was Dr. Robert Kim, a xenobiologist who had been studying the reports. He had equipment that could measure things Alex didn't understand, quantum fields and dimensional resonance and other scientific terms that went over his head. Are you ready, Danny? Dr. Banks asked. Danny nodded. Let's do this, Doc. I want to see what all the fuss is about. Dr. Banks injected Danny with a drug that would stop his heart. It was the same procedure used in some advanced medical treatments, but usually only for a few seconds. This time, they planned to keep him dead for several minutes. The heart monitor showed Danny's pulse slowing down. His breathing became shallow, then stopped completely. The line on the monitor went flat. He's clinically dead, Dr. Banks announced. Doctor. Kim was watching his instruments carefully. I'm reading some unusual energy patterns. There's definitely something happening at the quantum level. For 3 minutes, Danny Cooper was dead. His heart wasn't beating, his brain showed no activity, and his body temperature began to drop. But Dr. Banks didn't give up. She continued to work, injecting drugs and performing procedures that should have been useless on a dead person. Come on, Danny, she said, just as she had with Private Clark. Don't give up on me. Your unit needs you. Dr. Kim's instruments suddenly went crazy. I'm reading massive quantum fluctuations. Something is happening to the dimensional structure around the body. Dr. Banks was still working, refusing to accept that Danny was gone. She had been doing this for 15 years, and she had never given up on a patient. She wasn't going to start now. His heart is starting again, someone called out. The monitor showed a pulse, weak at first but growing stronger. Danny's eyes opened. And just like Private Clark, they seemed to glow with an inner light. How do you feel? Dr. Banks asked. Danny sat up on the table, moving with a grace that hadn't been there before. I feel different, like I can sense things I couldn't before. What kind of things? Danny looked around the room. I can feel the energy from the ship's engines. I can sense the emotions of everyone here, and I can see ... He paused, looking confused. I can see things that aren't there yet. What do you mean? I can see what you're going to do before you. Do it, like when you reach for that medical scanner. I saw you do it 3 seconds before you actually moved. Dr. Kim was studying his readings with excitement. The quantum entanglement is off the charts. His brain is somehow connected to probability fields. He's not just predicting the future, he's sensing multiple possible futures simultaneously. Alex watched as Danny stood up and walked around the medical bay. The Marine moved like a dancer, every step perfectly balanced. When Dr. Banks dropped a medical instrument, Danny caught it before it hit the floor, even though he hadn't been looking in that direction. "This is impossible," Alex said. "How does dying make someone better?" Dr. Kim looked up from his instruments. "I have a theory. Human consciousness appears to be quantum-based. When someone dies, their consciousness doesn't just disappear. It transitions to a different quantum state. In English, please. When humans die, their minds go somewhere else. A different dimension, maybe. But if medical personnel refuse to give up and keep trying to bring them back, they can pull that consciousness back into the body. And when it returns, it brings something extra with it." Extra what? "Knowledge, abilities, a connection to quantum fields that normal humans don't have." Alex was trying to process this information. "So, every time a medic refuses to give up on a dead patient, they're potentially creating a superhuman?" That's a simplified way to put it, but yes. Danny was still walking around the medical bay, testing his new abilities. He picked up a heavy piece of equipment with one hand, lifted it effortlessly, and set it down gently. "The strength enhancement is incredible," Dr. Banks noted. "His muscle efficiency has increased by at least 300%. And the reflexes," Dr. Kim added. "His reaction time is now faster than human nerves should allow. He's reacting to things before the signals reach his brain." Alex thought about the implications. If every human military medic could potentially create enhanced soldiers, it would change the nature of warfare completely. No wonder the Zephyrians had developed protocols to avoid fighting humans with medical equipment. "Danny, how do you feel about combat now?" Alex asked. Danny considered the question. "I feel like I could take on a whole squad of Zephyrians, but I also feel like I don't want to hurt anyone unless I have to. It's strange. I'm more powerful, but I'm also more peaceful." "That's consistent with the other reports," Dr. Banks said. "The enhanced soldiers show increased empathy along with their physical improvements." Alex looked at the assembled team. "We need to keep this quiet for now. If word gets out that we can create super soldiers, every military in the galaxy will want to use this technology." "But sir," Kate said, "think about the strategic advantage. If we can enhance our soldiers this way, we could end the war quickly. And if we can't control the process, we could create problems that make the war look like a minor disagreement," Alex replied. "We need to understand this phenomenon completely before we start using it as a weapon." Dr. Kim was still studying his readings. "There's something else. The quantum signature of enhanced humans is unique. Any species with advanced sensors can detect them from a considerable distance. That explains why the Zephyrians retreat," Alex realized. "They're not just afraid of what enhanced humans can do. They can actually detect when one is nearby." Danny was looking at his hands with wonder. "I can feel the quantum fields Dr. Kim is talking about." Dr. Robert Kim had been studying blood samples from enhanced soldiers for 3 months, and every test result made him question everything he thought he knew about human biology. The cellular structure of these soldiers was unlike anything in medical textbooks. "This shouldn't be possible," he said to his research assistant, Dr. Linda Peterson. They were working in the advanced laboratory aboard the research station Galileo. Far from the front lines of the war, Linda looked at the microscope display showing Danny Cooper's blood cells. The mitochondria are producing energy at rates that should kill the cells. But instead, they're thriving. "It's not just the energy production," Robert said, pointing to another screen. "Look at the neural pathways. The brain scans show connections that weren't there before the enhancement process." The enhanced soldiers had volunteered to be test subjects, understanding that science needed to figure out what had happened to them. Danny Cooper visited the lab once a week for tests. Private Bobby Clark came in whenever he was on leave from active duty. There were now 12 confirmed cases of human enhancement, and all of them showed the same impossible biological changes. Dr. Kim, Linda said, studying another set of readings. The quantum entanglement readings are stable across all subjects. Whatever happened to them, it's permanent, Robert nodded. He had been tracking the quantum signatures of enhanced humans for weeks. Each one showed the same pattern of molecular-level entanglement that connected them to what he could only describe as another dimension of reality. The most interesting part is that they're all connected to each other, Robert said. When one enhanced human experiences something, the others seem to sense it on some level. This had been discovered by accident when Danny Cooper was injured during a training exercise. At the exact moment he was hurt, Bobby Clark had stopped in the middle of a conversation 3 star systems away and said he felt like someone he knew was in pain. It's like they're part of a network, Linda observed. A quantum network that spans across space. The door to the lab opened and Admiral Carol Wilson entered. She was a stern woman in her 50s who commanded the research division of the human fleet. Behind her came Captain Alex Turner, who had been coordinating the Enhanced Human Research Project. Dr. Kim, the Admiral said, I need your latest findings. The military command wants to know if we can use this enhancement process to create super soldiers. Robert felt uncomfortable with the question. Admiral, we still don't understand the long-term effects. We're dealing with forces beyond our current scientific knowledge, but you can replicate the process? Under controlled conditions, yes. Dr. Banks has successfully enhanced 6 volunteers in the past month, but each enhancement requires the subject to actually die first, and there's always a risk that they won't come back. Captain Turner stepped forward. What kind of risk are we talking about? About 1 in 10 subjects don't return, Robert said honestly. We don't know why some people can be brought back and others can't. Admiral Wilson looked troubled. That's a significant casualty rate for a voluntary procedure. There's something else, Linda added. The enhanced humans aren't just physically different. Their personalities change too. They become more empathetic, more peaceful. Some of them have trouble with aggressive military tactics. Robert pulled up a psychological profile on his computer. Danny Cooper used to be known for his aggressive fighting style. Now he prefers to disable enemies rather than kill them. Bobby Clark has refused 3 direct orders to use lethal force when non-lethal options were available. Is that a problem? The Admiral asked. Depends on your perspective, Captain Turner said. In some ways, they're more effective soldiers, because they can neutralize threats without causing unnecessary casualties. But in other ways, they're less reliable because they won't follow orders that conflict with their enhanced moral sense. Robert brought up another set of data. The brain scans show increased activity in areas associated with empathy and moral reasoning. It's as if the enhancement process doesn't just improve their physical abilities, but also makes them more ethical. Admiral Wilson studied the data carefully. Dr. Kim, I need you to be completely honest with me. If we scaled up this process, if we enhanced hundreds or thousands of soldiers, what would be the consequences? Robert had been thinking about this question for weeks. Admiral, I believe we would create a new subspecies of humanity. The enhanced humans are so different from baseline humans that they might eventually become a separate species entirely. Explain. Their children will likely carry some of these enhanced traits. We've already detected quantum signatures in the unborn children of enhanced subjects. If we create a large population of enhanced humans, they might eventually replace baseline humanity altogether. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone considered the implications. There's another issue, Linda said. The Zephyrians have been studying this phenomenon longer than we have. We've intercepted some of their scientific reports, and they understand things about the enhancement process that we're just beginning to discover. Captain Turner looked interested. What kind of things? Robert pulled up a translated Zephyrian document. According to their research, the enhancement process only works with humans. They've tried to replicate it with their own species and with several other alien races. It doesn't work. Why not? Human consciousness appears to be unique in the galaxy. We're the only species whose minds can transition between quantum states and return with enhanced abilities. Admiral Wilson was reading the Zephyrian report. This says they've been encountering enhanced humans for over 50 years, long before we knew the process existed. That's correct, Robert said. There are historical accounts in their military. Records of human medics creating what they call Death Walkers during early conflicts. Death Walkers? Their term for enhanced humans. They believe that when humans die and come back, they bring part of the afterlife with them. Linda pulled up another document. The Zephyrians have developed specific weapons designed to counter enhanced humans. Energy weapons that disrupt quantum fields. Have they been successful? Captain Turner asked. Partially, Robert said. They can temporarily disable an enhanced human's abilities, but they can't permanently remove the enhancement. The quantum entanglement reasserts itself within a few hours. Admiral Wilson was looking at casualty reports from recent battles. Dr. Kim, I'm seeing something interesting here. In every engagement where enhanced humans were present, Zephyrian casualties were significantly lower than in normal combat. That's consistent with what we've observed, Robert said. Enhanced humans prefer to incapacitate rather than kill. They seem to have an instinctive understanding that all sentient life is connected. Is that why the Zephyrians retreat when they detect medical equipment? Partly. They're afraid of enhanced humans, but they're also confused by them. Their military doctrine is based on the assumption that enemies will try to kill them. Enhanced humans violate that assumption by trying to minimize casualties on both sides. Captain Turner was studying the psychological profiles. Some of our enhanced soldiers have actually provided medical aid to wounded Zephyrian soldiers during battles. That's been reported several times, Linda confirmed. Enhanced humans seem to see all suffering as something to be prevented, regardless of species or allegiance. Admiral Wilson made a decision. Dr. Kim, I want you to continue your research, but with new priorities. I need to know 3 things. First, can we control the enhancement process to create soldiers who will follow orders without moral objections? Second, can we protect our enhanced humans from Zephyrian anti-quantum weapons? And third, what are the long-term consequences if we create a large population of enhanced humans? Robert felt uneasy about the first question. Admiral, trying to create enhanced humans without the moral improvements might not be possible. The empathy enhancement seems to be connected to the physical enhancements. They might be part of the same quantum process. Try anyway. We need soldiers who can fight, not philosophers who prefer peace. After the Admiral left, Robert and Linda continued their work in uncomfortable silence. They were studying something that could change the future of humanity, but the military wanted to use it as just another weapon. Linda, Robert said finally, what if the enhanced humans are ripe? What if their increased empathy isn't a side effect but the main point? What do you mean? What if this enhancement process isn't about creating better soldiers? What if it's about creating better people? Linda looked at the data on her screen, showing the quantum signatures of 12 humans who had died and come back as something more than they were before. If that's true, she said, then we might be studying the next step in human evolution, Robert nodded. The question was whether humanity was ready for that next step, or if they would try to use it for war instead of peace. 5 years had passed since the first documented case of human enhancement, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The legend of the Medkit protocol was now known on every inhabited world, whispered in alien languages. Across 1,000 star systems. Captain Kelly Stone stood on the bridge of the medical frigate Hippocrates, watching as another Zephyrian fleet retreated at maximum speed. Her ship hadn't fired a single shot, but the moment the enemy detected their medical base signatures, they had turned and fled. Ma'am, that's the 3rd fleet this week, reported Lieutenant Commander Tony Rodriguez, her chief medical officer. They won't even come within scanner range anymore? Kelly nodded. The Hippocrates had become something of a legend itself. With the most advanced medical bay in the human fleet and a crew trained in the enhancement process, they were classified by enemy forces as a reality-class weapon. "How many successful enhancements this month?" Kelly asked. 43 confirmed returns, Tony replied. "We've perfected the process to the point where we have a 97% success rate." Kelly thought about those numbers. 43 soldiers who had died in combat and been brought back as enhanced humans. Each one now possessed abilities that made them nearly impossible to kill and completely unwilling to kill others unnecessarily. "Any word from Admiral Wilson about the new protocols?" Tony's expression darkened. "She's still pushing for military enhancement programs. She wants us to create enhanced soldiers without the empathy improvements." Kelly had been fighting this battle for months. The military leadership couldn't understand that the moral enhancement wasn't a side effect they could remove. It was an essential part of what made the process work. "Have the research teams made any progress on selective enhancement?" Dr. Kim's latest report was clear. Every attempt to create enhanced humans without increased empathy has failed. The subjects either don't return from death or they come back with severe psychological problems. Kelly understood why the military wanted controllable super soldiers, but she had seen what enhanced humans were capable of. They weren't just better fighters, they were better people, and that scared some commanders more than enemy weapons. The communication console chimed with an incoming message. "Captain, we're receiving a distress call from the surface of Proxima Centauri B. A Marine patrol is trapped behind enemy lines." Kelly looked at the tactical display. "How many Marines?" Just one, ma'am." Lieutenant Sarah Davis, her entire squad was wiped out in an ambush. She's surrounded by a full Zephyrian regiment. "One Marine against an entire regiment?" Tony shook his head. "We need to send a rescue team." "Check her equipment manifest," Kelly ordered. The tactical officer scanned the data. "Standard Marine. Loadout including field rations, ammunition, and..." He paused. "A standard issue field medkit." Kelly felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. One human with medical supplies, surrounded by hundreds of enemy soldiers who had been trained. To fear exactly that combination? "Ma'am, the Zephyrian forces are trying to retreat, but they're being blocked by orbital bombardment from their own ships. They can't leave without engaging." Kelly realized what was about to happen. The Zephyrians were trapped with a human carrying medical equipment, and their own doctrine required them to retreat. But with nowhere to go, they would be forced to break their own protocols. "Open a channel to the planet's surface," Kelly ordered. "I want to monitor what happens down there." On the surface of Proxima Centauri B, Lieutenant Sarah Davis crouched behind a boulder, watching as Zephyrian soldiers surrounded her position. She had been fighting for 6 hours since her squad was killed, and her ammunition was running low. Sarah could hear the clicking voices of the alien soldiers as they coordinated their attack. There were at least 200 of them, maybe more. Her rifle had enough ammunition for maybe 20 more shots. She looked at her equipment pack. Water, rations, emergency beacon, and the field medkit that every Marine carried. She had never used the medkit for anything more serious than treating minor cuts and burns. The Zephyrian commander was shouting orders in his own language, but Sarah could understand enough to know they were afraid. They kept mentioning the human, medical equipment, and their voices carried a tone of desperation. Sarah made a decision that would change the course of the war. Instead of waiting for the enemy to attack, she stood up and walked out from behind her cover, her hands raised but still holding her rifle. "I know you can understand me," she called out to the Zephyrian commander. "You're afraid of this medkit. You want to know why? I'll show you." The alien soldiers raised their weapons but didn't fire. Their commander clicked nervously to his subordinates. "You've been told that humans with medical equipment are dangerous," Sarah continued. "You've been told to retreat when you detect medical supplies, but you can't retreat this time, can you?" The commander stepped forward, his plasma rifle aimed at Sarah's chest. "Human soldier, surrender your weapons and medical equipment." "I'll surrender my weapons," Sarah said, dropping her rifle. "But the medkit stays with me," That is not acceptable. Sarah smiled. Then you'll have to take it from me. The commander hesitated. His entire military training told him to avoid this exact situation, but he had no choice. His fleet was trapped in orbit, and his soldiers couldn't retreat. You do not understand what you are doing, the commander said. Human medical equipment creates dangers you cannot control. I understand perfectly, Sarah replied. You're afraid because you know what happens when humans refuse to accept death. The standoff continued for several minutes. 200 Zephyrian soldiers surrounded one human marine, but none of them wanted to be the first to attack. Finally, the commander made his decision. Attack Pattern 7. Disable the human but do not damage the medical equipment. The Zephyrian soldiers opened fire, but they used low-power stun settings instead of lethal plasma beams. They wanted to capture Sarah alive to study her medical equipment. Sarah felt the stun beams hit her, and her vision started to fade. As she fell to the ground, she heard the Zephyrian soldiers approaching. But instead of feeling defeated, she felt strangely peaceful. When Sarah woke up, she was lying on a medical table in what appeared to be a Zephyrian field hospital. Her medkit was sitting on a nearby table, its contents spread out for examination. You are awake, said a Zephyrian in a white coat who was obviously a doctor. We wish to understand your medical practices. Sarah sat up and looked around. She was surrounded by wounded Zephyrian soldiers, some with serious injuries. The alien doctors were working to treat them, but their medical technology seemed limited compared to human equipment. You want to understand human medicine? Sarah asked. We wish to understand why human medical personnel create enhanced warriors. Sarah looked at the wounded aliens around her. They were suffering, just like human soldiers suffered when they were injured. Pain was universal, regardless of species. It's not about creating warriors, Sarah said. It's about refusing to give up on life. She stood up and walked to her medkit. The Zephyrian doctors didn't stop her. May I? She asked, gesturing toward a badly wounded alien soldier. The doctor looked confused but nodded. Sarah began treating the wounded Zephyrian using her human medical supplies. The alien's injuries were severe, plasma burns that had damaged vital organs. By Zephyrian medical standards, he was beyond help, but Sarah didn't accept that. She worked for hours, using every technique she had learned, refusing to give up even when the alien's vital signs flatlined. He is dead, the Zephyrian doctor said. You must stop. No, Sarah said firmly. I don't give up on patients. She continued working, performing the same kind of desperate medical intervention that had created enhanced humans. But this time, she was working on an alien. The wounded Zephyrian's vital signs returned. His eyes opened, and just like enhanced humans, they seemed to glow with an inner light. When he spoke, his voice carried the same harmonic quality that enhanced humans possessed. I feel different, the Zephyrian said in perfect English. Though he had never spoken a human language before, the other Zephyrian doctors stared in amazement. Their colleague wasn't just alive? He was enhanced, just like the humans they had feared for so long. How is this possible? The doctor asked Sarah. Because consciousness is universal, Sarah said. The enhancement isn't something special about humans. It's something special about refusing to accept death. Word of what happened on Proxima Centauri be spread quickly through both human and Zephyrian communication networks. Within days, Zephyrian medical personnel were requesting training in human medical techniques. The war ended not with a final battle, but with a joint medical conference. Zephyrian and human doctors worked together to understand the enhancement process. They discovered that any intelligent species could be enhanced if their medical personnel refused to accept death and were willing to fight for every life. Captain Kelly Stone received the surrender document aboard the Hippocrates. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't surrendering because they had been defeated. They were surrendering because they wanted to learn. The galaxy has changed, Admiral Wilson said during the signing ceremony. We're not just allies now. We're partners in understanding something bigger than war.